Hi ladies, so I just wanted to run through a quick little lesson video on the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is actually going to be a great launching point into the real world, and it's going to utilize the information that we learned last week concerning simplifying radicals. So let's get started. So the quadratic formula itself is this cute little formula right over here. And let's actually write out what it is in English so that you guys have, kind of a launching point to repeat to yourself over and over and over again. So this formula is x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So again, I would definitely write this sentence down, repeat it to yourself over and over and over again, just to kind of help yourself memorize this formula. The quicker you memorize this formula, the more painless this entire lesson will be, I promise. So let's go through some of the steps that we need to utilize before we can actually utilize this formula. So step one, we need to make sure that our equation is written in standard form. So what does standard form mean? Well, we just need to make sure that everything is simplified and to the left of 0. Okay? So if we have terms on the right, we need to go ahead and move them over to the left side. So let's look at 1, for example. Number 1, everything is already on the left side, so we're already good with this first step. Step 2, identify A, B, and C. So what I like to do is you can either write A, B, and C right underneath your equation, or you can label them nicely. So I'm going to do that for you. So A is equal to 1, because we know that there's a 1 in front of that x squared. B is equal to 2. And C, be careful with this one, it is going to be negative 63. We always take the sign that's in front of the number we're talking about, okay? Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and start substituting into the formula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to literally plug it in as I see it. So I know I have the opposite of b, so let me put my x equals first. X equals the opposite of b, and b is 2, so the opposite of 2 will be negative 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared, and I'm going to plug these in using parentheses. Get in the habit of plugging in things with parentheses, especially under the radical, because you're going to notice that with all these sign changes and squaring and simplifying, it's going to get a little hectic. So I have b squared, we know b is 2, so I have 2 squared, minus 4ac, so a is 1, and c is negative 63. And this is going to be all over 2a, which is 1. Okay, so let's simplify this. So something I like to do, and if you guys don't have a calculator at home or if you don't feel like using your phones, you can go on Desmos.com, that calculator that we've used in class a few times, and I'm just going to plug in this entire thing in there. If you want to do it by hand, go for it, but we have technology, so don't kill yourself. So let's simplify this a little bit. So I got x equals, still have that negative 2 in front, plus or minus the square root, and everything under the square root simplifies to 256. So be careful when you're typing everything in, okay? So I have 256, and this is all over 2 because 2 times 1 will give me 2. Okay, so what did we learn last week? We learned that we could simplify numbers under a radical. So I'm going to do that. What is the square root of 256? Well, that beautifully reduces to 16. So I'm going to rewrite this. So I have x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus 16 all over 2. And again, if you struggle with that radical, please refer to last week's lesson. Please go over some of those activities and feel free to reach out to me, and I would love to help you, kind of get through whatever you're having trouble with, okay? So let's simplify this. We got something here we got to talk about. So this is actually two equations here. Well, two little setups. This plus or minus literally means that I have one equation where I have negative 2 plus 16 over 2, and I also have negative 2 minus 16 over 2. So now how this simplifies is negative 2 plus 16 will give me 14 over 2. And negative 2 minus 16, I'm getting more negative, will be negative 18 over 2. Negative 14 over 2, let's write this x equals, will simplify to 7. And negative 18 over 2 will simplify to be negative 9. So I'm going to write the negative one first, just because we normally put smaller numbers in front. And 14 over 2 again was 7. And again, negative 9 is smaller than 7. That's why I put that in the front. When we write things in set notation, which is what you're seeing right here, it just means that x has two answers, negative 9 and 7. And we were able to go ahead and use this quadratic formula to factor this quadratic. And we've learned how to factor in the past. Quadratic formula really helps us out when we get to situations that aren't easily factored. This one in particular was a nice one that we could have used factoring techniques, but you know, there will be problems in the future that you absolutely need to use this formula. So let's go ahead, let's try the next one. So I have my A, B, and C that I need to identify. So A, we have 6, B, we have negative 11, and C, we have negative 10. And again, I was able to skip right to the step because everybody is already on the left side. So I labeled my A, B, and C, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plug into my formula. So I have x equals the opposite of B, so the opposite of negative 11 is 11, plus or minus the square root of B squared, so that's negative 11 squared, minus 4A is 6, and C is negative 10, all over 2A, which is 6. So again, I'm going to go ahead and plug all of this right into my Desmos calculator, and that is going to simplify to be, I believe that's 361, yeah, 11 plus or minus the square root of 361, all over, and 2 times 6 will give me 12. Just to kind of talk about something that I feel like is going to be a question, 4 and 2 are just used in every single example. It's not some, you know, random number that I'm pulling out of the particular example. Those are just numbers already embedded in our formula, okay? So that's good. Let's continue with number 2. So I simplified what was under the radical, and I know I can actually simplify this further thanks to what we learned before. So the square root of 361 is going to simplify, and that is going to be 19. That's a nice one. All over 12. So again, as stated before, I actually have two little things that I need to simplify here. I have 11 plus 19 over 12, and I have 11 minus 19 over 12. So 11 plus 19 will be 30 over 12. And this fraction can actually simplify, and that's something you can actually do in Desmos as well. That will be 5 over 2. And 11 minus 19 will give me negative 8 over 12. That can simplify as well to be negative 2 over 3. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write my set notation. I'm going to put negative 2/3 first just because it's smaller, and then I have 5/2. So there's my other answer. Okay, so let's try number 3. So first thing I have to talk about is everything on the left side? No, it's not. So I need to bring this 1 over to the left side. He's a positive 1, so I'm going to subtract him over. So I have negative x squared plus 2x minus 1 is equal to 0. I have my x squared in the front, my x in the middle, my constant at the end. So my a, b, and c is good to go. Let's go ahead and label everybody. So I know a is negative 1, b is 2, and c is negative 1. Beautiful. Be careful with that leading coefficient in front of the x squared. That is a negative 1. Please be careful with that. I can already see that kind of being a little trouble. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's plug this in. So I got x is equal to the opposite of b, so that'll be negative 2, plus or minus the square roots of b squared minus 4. A is negative 1. C is negative 1. All over 2a, which is negative 1. Okay, let's go ahead and simplify this. So I got x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus. Let's look at this. So I got 2 squared minus 4 times negative 1 times negative 1. Nice. This is actually going to give me 0. So I'm left with the square root of 0 all over, and 2 times negative 1 will give me a negative 2. So what is the square root of 0? That's 0. I don't even need to worry about this anymore. So what I really have, and do I have plus or minus anything? No, because this is all 0, right? So really what I have is negative 2 over negative 2. What is the same number over the same number? Well, that's always 1. So we only have one answer for this one. And it just happens to be 1. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's look at number 4. So what do I need to look at immediately? The fact that I don't see a 0 on the right side. So I need to go ahead and I need to bring over 4x, and I need to bring over negative 15. So I'm going to subtract 4x over, because he's positive. So 4x minus 4x goes away, and I'm left with negative 2x squared. 3 minus 4 gives me negative 1x. And I still have a negative 15 on the other side. So what I'm going to do, since he's negative, I'm going to add him over. And there's nobody really to combine him with, right? So I'm going to put him at the end. So I have negative 2x squared minus 1x plus 15. So I can go ahead and label my a, b, and c. So my a is going to be negative 2. My b is going to be negative 1, and my c is going to be 15. Okay, beautiful. So let's start with our plug-in. So I have x is equal to the opposite of b, which the opposite of negative 1 will be 1, plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4, a is negative 2, and c is 15. All over 2a, which is negative 2. And guys, remember, please pause this video. If you feel like you're solid with this, there's no reason to continue watching. Just go ahead, fill out your packet, do as you please, okay? So let's go ahead, let's simplify this. So everything underneath this radical, let's go ahead, let's plug that into Desmos. That is going to simplify to be 121. So I have x is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of 121 all over, and 2 times negative 2 will give me a negative 4. Okay, so we know how to simplify 121. We know that the square root of 121 happens to be perfect. So the square root of 121 will be 11. So x is equal to 1 plus or minus 11 all over negative 4. And again, we have this situation where we have two different things we need to simplify, right? I have 1 plus 11 over negative 4, and I have 1 minus 11 over negative 4. So 1 plus 11 will give me 12. Divided by negative 4 is something that we can actually simplify. So 12 divided by negative 4 is negative 3. 1 minus 11 will give me negative 10. Divided by negative 4. So this does simplify. This will be a fraction. Negative over negative will give me a positive, and 10 over 4, both those numbers are divisible by 2, so I will have 5 over 2. And again, it's positive because we have a negative over a negative. So I have my two answers. So I have x is equal to, I typically like to put my, wow, that was an ugly scribble. Here, let's try this one again. Boop. So again, I like to put my smaller numbers in front. You know, if that is really giving you a headache, just do whatever for now. It's fine. We'll fix that next year. So I got -3, and I have 5/2. And here are my answers. All right, number 5. So I have a problem here, right? I am missing my 0 on my right side. So I got to bring this 24 over. He's positive, so I'm going to subtract. 24 minus 24, we know goes away. Beautiful. And now -1 minus 24 will give me a -25. So something you can do here, I can already feel a bunch of you being like, Miss A, this is a difference of perfect squares. Yes, go for it, girl. Simplify it using perfect squares. Totally fine. I don't care. I'm just here to show you guys what to do in these kind of situations when we want to use the quadratic formula, okay? And the reason why we have this example here is because there's something different here that hasn't happened yet in any of the other problems. So maybe pause the video, think about it for a second. But I'm going to answer that for you right now. So, for example, I only have 2 things here, right? I don't have 3 like normal. Where are my 3 terms? I only have 2. Well, who are we missing? We know that A, let me put this in a different color. A normally goes with my x squared, right? Then we normally have B going with an x. And then we normally have C as just a number, right? That's our standard form. Well, over here, I don't have some coefficient with an x, right? I'm missing that term. So what I really have here is I have A, which is 9. B, we don't have one, right? So what do we do when we don't have something? We put 0. And C is going to be -25. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's use our quadratic formula. So I have x is equal to the opposite of b, which is still 0, plus or minus the square root. B squared, still 0, minus 4ac. And c is -25. Cute. All over 2a, which is 9. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's simplify this. So we know that we can simplify this. This will give me 900. So I have 0 plus or minus 900 all over, and 2 times 9 gives me 18. Okay, so the square root of 900 is really nice. That's also perfect. That will give us the square root of 900. That will give us 30. Nice. Okay. A couple of you are probably wondering, hey, Miss A, why do you keep writing 0 all these times? Well, the reason why I'm still writing 0 here is because I don't want you guys to forget that this plus or minus is still existing there, because that plus or minus is really going to actually affect the 30. And the reason why is because we will have plus 30 over 18, and we will also have minus 30 over 18. And again, these are fractions that the number on top and on bottom are both even. So they can definitely simplify, and these both will simplify to be 5/3. So the first one will be a positive 5/3, and the one on the bottom will be a negative 5/3. So I'm going to write my x equals. I'm going to put my smaller term first. Again, this is just math notation. We like to have our smaller ones first. And I have 5/3. Another way you might see this written, you might see it written like this. So x is equal to plus or minus 5/3. They mean the same exact thing, okay? All right, 6. What am I missing? I don't have a 0 on the right, so I'm going to bring over my 10x. He's positive, so I'm going to subtract. So I have 8x squared minus 10x is equal to 0, because these two will cancel out. So again, I have the same kind of issue that I had with number 5, right? I'm clearly missing my third term, but in this particular problem, I'm missing a constant. So that means I'm missing my last one, which will be my c. So I have a, because I have an x squared term, be 8. I have a b, because I have an x term, right? That will be negative 10. But I don't have a c, so that will be 0. Let's go ahead. We have x is equal to the opposite of b, which will be 10, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 10 squared, minus 4a, which is 8, and c, which is 0, all over 2a, which is 8. All right, so I got x is equal to, I have 10 plus or minus, and everything that we have underneath this square root will simplify nicely to be, let's see, 100 minus 0, so that'll just be 100. All over, and 2 times 8 will give me 16. Okay, we know how to simplify what's underneath this radical. The square root of 10 is perfect, so that will simplify to be 10. So again, I had 10 plus or minus 10 all over 16. Again, I got to set up my two little equations. So I have 10 plus 10 over 16. And I have 10 minus 10 all over 16. So this will give me 0 over 16, which is just 0. And this will give me 20 over 16, which they're both even, and they will both simplify. So I have 5 over 4. All right, so again, let's write our answer. My smaller number is going to go first. And we are done. All right, so I'm going to have the rest of them be part 2, so tune in for that second part.